أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أفمن يعلم أنما أنزل إليك من ربك الحق كمن هو أعمى. إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. الذين يوفون بعهد الله ولا ينقضون الميثاق والذين يصلون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويخشون ربهم ويخافون سوء الحساب والذين صبروا ابتغاء وجه ربهم وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية ويدرؤون بالحسنة السيئة أولئك لهم عقبى الدار جنات عدن يدخلونها ومن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم والملائكة يدخلون عليهم من كل باب سلام عليكم بما صبرتم فنعم عقبى الدار صدق الله العظيم.
When we say that America's next great university will be a Muslim university, is probably not what people are thinking. The American Islamic College began 40 years ago with a vision that was really embodied by Professor Ismail al-Faruqi, our founding president and provost, and supported by a number of people both in the United States and all over the Muslim majority world. But it was a vision of a liberal arts university that would not be beholden to any particular denomination, group, or even country or body anywhere in the world, but a university that would aspire to be an intellectual hub and home for all Muslims, regardless of their denomination, regardless of their affiliation, regardless of the specificities of their own interpretation of what it means to be Muslim. And so this vision was ecumenical, and it was all-embracing, and it was universal, and it was a vision that really challenged and challenges today many of our denominationally specific institutions and ways of being. This college was brought into being to be something that the world had never really experienced before, something that the Muslim community certainly had never really experienced before. But it was brought into being because Professor al-Faruqi and all of the other people who supported him and worked with him and supported this vision, they believed that this is what the Muslim community in the United States of America most needed. Chicago is one of the most diverse Muslim places in the world. We have so many different groups that self-identify as Muslims and yet do not have a shared institution or a shared fabric in which they can study, in which they can pray, in which they can just be Muslim together and learn from each other. You know, the Quran says that we've created you differently, not so that you can dehumanize one another, but so that you might learn from one another. And so the American Islamic College was brought into being to be a place, an equal playing field where Muslims of all different kinds could come together and learn from each other and challenge each other and seek the truth sincerely together and in one another's company. And so this was a radical vision 40 years ago, and it's a radical vision today. This American Islamic College was intended to be an Islamic liberal arts college that would be universal in embrace, that would be multi-faith in its constitution, in terms of its students and its faculty, and would be, again, a place for all sincere seekers of truth. So much of the problems that we see on the streets of our cities, so many of the problems that we see in our world today feed upon ignorance, and they feed upon fear and the dehumanization of others and the devaluation of others. And so this is an educational crisis. When we look at the environment, when we look at our inability to live in a pluralistic and ethnically and racially diverse society, to live respectfully with one another, this all stems from an educational crisis. Because education is the way that we grow out of fear. Education is the way that we quell the fires of fear and ignorance, and we replace those dark places and those charred places with knowledge and with sincere seeking and with respect. And so the American Islamic College was really brought into being as a medicinal institution to treat not only the ills of the Muslim community when we speak of it globally, and even sometimes our inability to get along with other Muslims who think or believe differently than we do. But it was also intended to be a medicinal institution for a world which is still grappling in a very palpable way, in a very dramatic way, with difference of belief, with ethnic and racial differences, and with socioeconomic disparities that are in many ways the result of systemic racism and systemic injustice. And so this is meant to be a university the likes of which the world has never really seen. It is unapologetically Muslim, and that is important because the Muslim community is often marginalized. And so for Muslims in the United States and for other places as well, where Muslims live as a religious minority and are often racialized, as a racialized minority as well, it's a liberating thing for them to be able to walk into a Muslim space and to be able to have these kinds of conversations and to be able to study and to be engaged in this kind of respectful debate, but be able to do it in a space where they are not marginalized. So this is also a place of prayer. It's also a place of religiosity, but it's not just a place of Muslim prayer. It's a place where anyone, any sincere seeker who wants to be here and who wants to work on their walk with God and their relationship with God, they're welcome to do that here. And so we have Christian groups who rent space and sometimes will use our facilities for their own liturgical needs and their own liturgical functions. This to us is part of our mission here, that we are meant to be a resource for the entire society. And we are meant to be a friend and an ally to all the other communities with whom we share this city, this country, and this world. So when we say that the next great American university will be a Muslim university, inshallah, God willing, what we mean is what America needs from its next great university is a university that will be unambiguously and unapologetically Muslim in character, while seeking to serve the entirety of American society. Among our institutional commitments, then, are the commitments to interfaith understanding and interreligious relations. Our commitment to intra-faith understanding, that is, for Muslims of different denominational backgrounds and different schools of thought to not only learn about themselves, but to learn more about one another so that we can appreciate one another's stories and how these denominations evolved and emerged within our own religious history. We also have to uphold a commitment to justice, as the Quran says that we must uphold justice even if it's against ourselves. And so what does that mean in today's society? I think it has to mean standing with marginalized communities who have suffered not only individual acts of discrimination and violence, but have been suffering under systemic discrimination and injustice for generations. Another commitment that we must embrace and embody as a Muslim institution of higher education is we must embrace the commitment to sustainable living and to the protection of the environment. One of the great advantages of being a religiously affiliated institution is that we can speak here of the sacredness of the creation. You know, before there were any books of revelation, there was nature. And the Quran is constantly calling attention to that first book, that is the book of nature, because all the evidence of God's existence and all the evidence of God's benevolence and love for humanity and for the entire creation, it's all manifest in the creation itself. And so human beings, according to Muslim theology and Quranic teaching, human beings were created to be the caretakers of the creation, not just the takers, not the desecrators, not the exploiters, not the profiteers, but the caretakers, the servants of the creation. I've said that the emergence of a university like this is what America needs. But I think it's important also to acknowledge that the emergence of a university like this is what the Muslim community, and I'm speaking globally now, and inclusively now, ecumenically now, the Muslim community needs. The Muslim community is not immune to the problems that are facing the world. We are not immune to gross socioeconomic imbalances and disparities. We are not immune to racism. And so the medicinal value of an institution like this is also medicinal for our community. And so I believe in my bones, I believe that the emergence of a university like the American Islamic College is now a matter of necessity. If we don't begin to live differently, if we don't begin to learn how to interact with one another in dignity and in respect, if we don't begin to address the gross injustices and systemic racism that exists within our community and within our world, we as a human family will not make it. We will not survive. And so the vision that initiated this college 40 years ago is as relevant and as radical today as it was 40 years ago. And it is my honor, it is my privilege, it is my blessing to be the steward of this institution at this moment and to witness its renewal and to oversee its progress toward the horizon of its inevitable realization.
Respond to every call that excites your spirit. Rumi. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Ramadan Kareem, everyone. It is my honor to stand before you today, once again responding to the call of American Islamic College. My name is Arshia Ali-Khan, and I am the current CEO of the Muslim Legal Fund of America. The mission of MLFA is to advance equality and justice for American Muslim organizations and individuals by combating the injustices done in the name of national security. When I was invited to MC this event for American Islamic College, there was no way I could say no. AIC was and will always be dear to my heart because I believe with all my heart that the truth will manifest and falsehood will perish. Despite the challenges, despite what you may have heard or what you think you know or what you don't know about this college, I stand before you today to bear witness of the good that is here, the vision that has allowed us to overcome, the vision that brings us together today. I come before you heart to heart and soul to soul to bring that vision to life, that dream to manifest, that plan to renew and revive. Our program today began with a beautiful recitation from Sister Madiha Javed. I'd like to share a few words from her bio to honor her contribution. Madiha Javed is a Scottish law graduate, activist, and a women's rights campaigner from Glasgow, Scotland. She is currently in residence and auditing courses at the American Islamic College while she is simultaneously working on projects in contemporary Islamic theology and women's scholarship as a visiting research fellow with the Bayan Graduate School, one of AIC's peer institutions here in Chicago. Thank you, Badiha, for that beautiful recitation. I'd also like to take a moment here to thank our sponsors, Islamic Relief, the Center of Islam in the Contemporary World at Shenandoah University, the Khalil Center, Heart, Women and Girls, and Ifanka. And without further ado, a word from our title sponsor, Islamic Relief.
The crisis in Syria has reached a grim milestone, a dire decade of bombing and hunger, death and destruction. Donate to Islamic Relief.
Hello, my name is Timothy Giannotti, and I have the privilege of being the current president of the American Islamic College. One of the great treasures we have here at AIC is our faculty. And our faculty all possess a unique dexterity that is really quite uncommon within academic realms. And that is that they are able to move between different pedagogies and different approaches, different ways of looking and the different ways of thinking. And this is because all of them have spent time in more traditional environments, and all of them have PhDs from Western research universities. And so they're able to combine the best of all approaches and the best of all pedagogies. And this brings tremendous richness to their interactions with students. Our faculty are very committed to the students. And so when we speak of the form of education that we espouse here at the American Islamic College, we do not say that we have an informational program. Rather, we're committed to a form of education which is transformational. And that means that it's very relationship-centered, it's very human-centered, and very mentoring intensive. Because we don't seek just to impart knowledge, but we seek to embrace and to pursue a kind of knowledge that changes lives. And so without further ado, I'll allow the faculty to introduce themselves. But I just want to say how proud I am of these faculty members and how privileged I feel to be able to offer this kind of transformative education to the students and others who come seeking knowledge here at AIC.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, I'm Professor Farial Salam. I teach Islamic Studies at American Islamic College. I'm Associate Professor of Arabic and Islamic Studies. I also direct the Muslim Chaplaincy Program, which is comprised of our Master of Divinity program in Islamic Studies. What we're working for as a faculty is to establish programs that are rigorous in their content, that challenge students, but also enrich students. They enrich students intellectually, spiritually. They enrich students in their perspective, worldview. So we have a wonderful group of students. I'm really delighted to work with them. And it's an exciting opportunity for me as a professor to be a part of a institution that's growing, that's vibrant, and that has a lot to contribute to American Muslim society. And I believe that American Muslims here at AIC and at other places have a lot to contribute to American society. I think that we enrich American society, and this is an opportunity for us to continue to build that.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Talat Pasha. I am the director of the Arabic Language Institute at American Islamic College. I have a PhD in Arabic and Linguistics from the University of Utah, Salt Lake City. I joined American Islamic College in 2018 to lead the Arabic Language Institute and to design the Arabic language program. Since 2018, I have been working and developing the Arabic language curriculum for the 4 years. I am pleased to announce that right now we have completed a 4-year curriculum that equips the students with the tools needed to unlock the language of Quran, the language of Hadith, the language of classical Arabic sources and texts. In the first and second year, we combine the modern standard Arabic with classical Arabic. In the third and fourth year, our main focus is classical Arabic, grammar, morphology, semantics, and rhetoric. And this is what is needed by Arabic researchers and graduate students.
My name is Omar Awas. I'm associate professor at the American Islamic College. My background is my PhD is in religious studies. I've also done studies, traditional studies in the Middle East and Asia as well. Currently, I teach courses ranging from Quranic studies to Islamic law, as well as contemporary and modern courses on modern Islam and Islamic history. Being at AIC gives me the opportunity to utilize the different tracks of training that I have undergone during my period, my study periods, and where I had traditional Islamic studies as well as Western academic studies, and integrate those two different approaches of pedagogy as well as research and frameworks of looking at the world. And that sort of synthesized or integrated approach informs both my research and my teaching. And in that sense, that's a wonderful opportunity that I have here at the American Islamic College.
My name is Dr. Shabana Mir. I'm Associate Professor of Anthropology, and I'm also Director of Undergraduate Studies at American Islamic College. I'm a PhD graduate from Research One Universities, and I've worked at several public and private US universities prior to AIC. In our classes, we're able to engage in internal critique within Muslim community spaces. Muslims are able to talk about the problems that are in our communities without worrying about humanizing Muslims. So they are able to get further in terms of critique. Students explore both the Islamic scholarly tradition and contemporary research on Islamic subjects, but we also teach the human element in religious sources. So the changing historical development in Islamic jurisprudence and in law, as it varies by cultural, political, and social context, is really important to us. American Islamic College is a place of immense value. It is a college that needs to be developed further for you and for your children. As new scholarship on Islam and Muslims flourishes, we need an academic center to work out what we believe, how we think about the new world, and how we can organize our thinking about new challenges in the world today.
Thank you, President Giannotti and the faculty, for your dedication and commitment to the mission and vision of the American Islamic College. The moment that we've all been waiting for is now upon us. I was a new college student when I first heard about Professor Esposito. And today I am humbled to be in the program with him and to introduce him to deliver our keynote address. Here are a few words from his bio. Professor John Esposito is a university professor, professor of religion and international affairs, and professor of Islamic studies at Georgetown University. He is also the founding director at Al-Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding and the Bridge Initiative, Protecting Pluralism, Ending Islamophobia in the Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. With more than 55 books to his name, his academic accolades would require a significant time commitment to recount. Suffice it to say, we are honored to have him with us tonight as a living link between this moment of renewal at AIC and our founding president and provost, who was Professor Esposito's graduate mentor and advisor at Temple University. We are also honored and deeply grateful to count him as a friend and a supporter of American Islamic College. Without further ado, I welcome John Esposito.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be joining with you here via the internet, and I wish to say to all of you an early Ramadan Kareem. And I want to talk tonight about AIC in terms of its founder, because I knew his founder very well. He was the first professor of Islamic studies in the religion department at Temple University. And as it turned out, I was his first PhD. That is, I finished my PhD under him, and I was the first one to get a PhD with Ismail al-Faruqi. So let me talk a bit about Ismail, and then the work who he was and the work that he did at Temple, and then let me move to Ismail and the American Islamic College. Ismail al-Faruqi was a Palestinian refugee, an Arab nationalist, and a scholar of Islam who would, during my years at Temple, be transformed into an Islamic scholar activist. And you'll see what I mean by that in some of my comments. Educated in the Arab world and the West, he had studied at missionary schools, a Catholic secondary school, and at the American University of Beirut, which was formerly the Syrian Protestant College. And finally at Harvard for an MA, and then earned his PhD at the University of Indiana. But after that, he then went and studied postdoctoral positions at Al-Azhar University for a number of years. Then the Islamic Research Institute in Karachi, where he was both a researcher, but also learning on spot. And then the University of Chicago, and then the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill University. Ismail was fluent in English, French, German, and obviously his native Arabic, and also very familiar with the Bible and particularly with Christianity. Ismail returned to the US from Canada and taught at Syracuse University for 3 years, then accepted a position at Temple University. Now, I should point out to you that at this point in history, this was a remarkable situation because Ismail came to Temple and really began to do his work in a new religion department. It was a world religions department. So people in the department were, the teachers either needed to be born into a tradition and be scholars, though not necessarily requiring that they be practicing or the particular kind of practice, or they could be converts into the tradition. And Islam was really the last major world religion that was now being instituted within the religion department. And in the late 60s and early 70s, Islam was invisible in America. Sure, there were Muslims in America, but there weren't that many, and they were usually known as, Egyptians, Lebanese, etc. But Islam and Muslims, or the visibility of mosques. I was born in cosmopolitan Brooklyn, New York City, and I never remember anything being said in my early education about Islam and Muslims in any real kind of fashion, and certainly no awareness of mosques, etc. Let me tell you a little bit about my encounter with Ismail and Islam. Ismail and Lamia al-Faruqi played a special role in my life. He once said to my parents in New York City at an American Academy of Religion meeting, and it was the only time that he actually ever met my parents. He said to my dad, "You are his physical parents, but I am his intellectual parent." If it had not been for Ismail, I would not have studied Islam nor benefited from the unique experience and insights of Temple University's program, because I was certainly not interested in or predisposed to want to study Islam. The big question was, why study Islam? And that was my response, my initial response, more than 40 years ago. It's actually 50 years ago, but I don't like to give away my age. So let's just say it was more than 40 years ago, when Bernard Phillips, the chair of the religion department at Temple, first suggested, when I went to him to talk about my program in general and what I wanted to do, which was to finish and get a PhD in Catholic theology, and then Temple required that you study 2 other religions, and I was going to look at Hinduism and Zen Buddhism, he suggested I take a course on Islam. This was the late 1960s. Now, I had spent 10 years in my earlier life with the Capuchin Franciscan fathers. I was never ordained, but I was educated, my college and even into my theology in Capuchin Franciscan monasteries. At the time, I was a young assistant professor of theology teaching at Rosemont College in Pennsylvania and had gone to Temple University to pursue a doctorate, attracted by the fact that I could actually major in Roman Catholic thought, but at a secular rather than a Catholic university. This was a first in terms of opportunity. The requirement, though, for all grad students in the department was to major in one religion and minor in two others. And Islam was not one of the ones that was on my list. So I'd gone to Phillips, the chair, and to my astonishment, he suggested I study Islam as one of my minor religions. Because Ismail had just finished a book on Christian ethics, Phillips thought we would work well together, across traditions. I did not. I knew little about Arabs or Islam, and what I did know, much of it through the media, etc., and a movie that I thought at the time was historical, and it proved that it wasn't. It was a best-selling book. It didn't attract me. However, Phillips was gently adamant. He's a very gentle man, but he was about as adamant as I ever saw Phillips get. And I, reflecting on the precarious position of a grad student who was also married and needed to finish his degree, said I would just take one course. Ismail's scholarship covered the whole spectrum of Islamic studies, covering areas such as the study of religion, Islamic thought, approaches to knowledge, history, culture, education, interfaith dialogue. He was one of the first major people involved in interfaith dialogue in the United States, aesthetics, ethics, politics, economics, science, women's issues. And in fact, he was the one that suggested to me for my dissertation that I write on women in family law, which I did not really want to get into. I didn't really fully appreciate how relevant it would and could be. He had an encyclopedic knowledge, a rare person among contemporary Muslim scholars at the time, because his encyclopedic knowledge also meant that he could speak very forcefully about Christianity and Judaism. In fact, I remember at one point, we were in a period at that time when there was also talk about the God is dead theology within Christian theologians. And Ismail, with one or two of the people in the department, actually did what Martin Luther did when he nailed his points or theses on the door of a cathedral in which he was differing with, and he was a Roman Catholic priest, with his tradition. And Ismail did the similar thing, saying that he would challenge them and he would be defending some of what he thought were important Roman Catholic beliefs that actually some of them mirrored in Islam against the kind of positions that they were taking. Faruqi was a dynamic and charismatic lecturer, and that's the most important thing because that's what ultimately got me to decide to study Islam. He made Islam and Muslim history come alive in a classroom. His knowledge of Western history, philosophy, and religion enabled him to place his remarks in a global context. My educational experience was deepened and broadened, to my surprise, by the fact that most of my classmates, and there were lots of them, normally you would not see lots of students in those days studying Islam. And I should point out that I'm pretty sure the Temple had the first department of religion that gave a doctorate in Islamic studies. Most other people in the field got their doctorates out of history departments, for example, or prominent schools of divinity. But here at Temple, Ismail had gone to in the Muslim world, recruited money every year to bring students from literally Egypt over to Malaysia, to bring them over regularly and be able to support them in study, but to have them also study courses in Christianity and Judaism. And some of this you will see when I talk about the vision that he had for AIC, which was very multi-religious in approach. Faruqi was a major catalyst and mentor. During my years as his student, Faruqi himself experienced a major transformation. As Faruqi would come to say, quote, "Until a few months ago, I was a Palestinian, an Arab, and a Muslim. Now I am a Muslim who happens to be an Arab from Palestine." Ismail was the most dynamic and engaging of lecturers. Like all great teachers, his energy and passion for his subject was contagious. In fact, during Ramadan, normally you would expect that the class would be shorter, etc. No, it wasn't. And it was the full time. He did not give us a break. His wife, when in fact it was time to break the fast, his wife would be in class, would go around and pass out dates to a number of us. But Ismail just kept moving. From the day he arrived until his untimely death, he and his wife, Lois Al-Farouqi, were murdered in their home in 1986. He would travel many times during the year, speaking and consulting in the Muslim world and raising funds to recruit and support the students. It was not uncommon, and this is important, for him to disappear after his last class that week and hop over to Libya, Egypt, Pakistan, Jordan, or Malaysia to raise funding for scholarships and return in time for his next class. I kind of remembered this just recently because when I first went to teach at Georgetown, I saw the president one day. In fact, the president invited me to address the board, and he went out of his way to say that here I was new at Georgetown, and he had been impressed by the fact that one or two students told him that they had this professor that they not only liked, but that had gone over to the Sudan and was sending faxes back to them and would be back in class in time. And I think I sort of got that by osmosis from Ismail. My Muslim classmates were bright, earnest young believers, as well as aspiring scholars studying Christianity and Judaism. Their enthusiasm would sometimes lead to awkward situations. A classmate studying Christianity visited an American classmate's family, and in his enthusiasm to make a point about his study of Christianity, he asked them for their Bible. Of course, they had a Bible, but there was like a concern among the family members because they weren't quite sure where it was in their apartment. Was it in the bedroom or was it here? Was it in this chest or not in that chest? And that's not true for many Christians, but it also is true even back then for some. They could be devout, but for certainly for Catholics, there was a tendency not really to be emphasize the entire Bible in the way that, for example, some Protestant groups do. We certainly did not emphasize the Old Testament other than in understanding Christ and the development of Christianity. But Ismail wore another hat as well. Some academics do and many don't. He was both an intellectual, a scholar, an author, but he was an institution builder. His desire to make Islam visible in American education and society was reflected in the late 1970s when he worked to have Islam as one of the major religions in the American Academy of Religions. You know, you need to think about this in those days. The American Academy of Religion, which is the organization in the world that deals with religion, etc., in those days, it had no section on Islam, let alone no permanent place and with multiple sections on Islam. It had lots with Christianity, Protestantism, Catholicism, Judaism, but not with regard to Islam. And in the 1980s, he and several colleagues also did something else that was creative and institutional. They created IIIT, the International Institute for the Study of Islam in Herndon, Virginia, in 1981. And in 1983, you had the launching of his unique vision, and that was the creation of the American Islamic College. I can still remember the early days when he would commute between Philadelphia and Chicago. I just marveled at the fact when I heard that he, was starting this college, and he was a senior officer in it. Ismail, as many of you know, was AIC's founding president and provost. His vision was extraordinary. And this is what's important. His vision was extraordinary in those days, and it remains extraordinary if one understands Ismail and his vision. It remains important today. That vision was to build a unique institution, a college fully accredited that would become a university in time, that served people of all faiths. It would be a Muslim, if you will, college or university, but one that served people of all faiths in a religiously and racially diverse, pluralistic American society. AIC was to be ecumenical or non-denominational, where Muslims and non-Muslims could study together and receive a rigorous education within a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural Islamic liberal arts school. It would still instill in its students the ideals which, in his words, were the founding fathers of America, those ideals that the founding fathers of America pursued and which continue to be marks of this country's greatness. That was Ismail's words. And that could also be true today, even more today, when we see what the last 8 or 10 years have certainly given us in terms of the divisions in our society, religiously, ethnically, the rise of white nationalism and white supremacism, etc. AIC has now existed for 4 decades, educating a diversity of students. Like many institutions, it has had its ups and downs, especially many small institutions. One need only note, and some of you may not be aware of it, that as a result of COVID, there are actually a number of prominent small colleges that have existed and have provided first-rate educations that have announced they're shutting down because of lack of funding. Now, for example, in recent years, I knew that AIC had gone through a process of transition complicated by funding problems. However, I had not been aware of its new leadership under the current president, Professor Timothy Giannotti. Important both because he's a Muslim and Italian American to me. Not only a noted scholar in Islamic studies, but also a dynamic leader. And that's what you need in the president of a university. It has to be somebody who's not only a scholar, but a person with vision, but a person with vision that is, if you will, an activist, is an institution builder. And that's what Ismail was. If you met him, if you saw him in action, speaking, moving around, etc., he was, a force of nature, as it were. My knowledge of AIC all changed when President Giannotti contacted me, and we had several long conversations about his vision and commitment to reinvigorate Ismail al-Faruqi's vision and rebuild this special college and eventually university. When I looked at vision and plans and took a close look at its faculty, its core faculty and curriculum, I was very impressed. I can tell you for myself that AIC's core faculty, like its president, are all established scholars trained at major research universities and well-published scholars with visibility and strong professional reputations. In fact, after one of the conversations that I had with the president, I happened to be on the internet and somebody referred to the writings of referred to the writings of one of the professors, one of the core faculty members. As I look at our university and world today, Ismail al-Faruqi's vision and the educational agenda he set for AIC speak to our contemporary realities in an America and globally. White nationalism and supremacism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and racism, hate speech, discrimination, and violence have become all too familiar. For some Americans, some of these qualities we saw as in other countries and signs of the instability of other countries or the authoritarian nature of other countries or the narrow-mindedness or the narrow-mindedness or of their religious vision and their cultural vision. Well, we've seen that in America. We've seen it happen often with a president that said Islam hates us, implemented a Muslim ban, and with the attack on the Capitol. So it's very much this vision of Ismail, the kind of vision he had in the past is needed today as much, if not even more, than in those days. These attitudes, these negative attitudes, these dangerous attitudes, with their hate speech and their hate actions at times and their violence, threaten the religious belief and religious communities, both cultural, communities and religious communities, and they threaten America's cultural and religious diversity and pluralism, civil liberties, and human rights. We have seen this all too often in the US, as I said, in presidential elections. And it's not just the statements of President Trump. If you look at also when Obama ran, as well as when Trump ran, a fair number of the Republican candidates used equally problematic language. One of them saying that a person couldn't be a believing Muslim and be in his cabinet. Another saying that Muslims should be asked whether or not they follow Sharia, and if they do, they should be sent home. Very much this kind of us and them world. But we see it also in Europe, in the UK, in the Netherlands, today in France and Austria, where under so-called, quote unquote, enlightened governments in France and Austria, you actually have particularly in the last couple of years, and very much in the last year, a move against Muslim civil society. Basically moving against the Muslim civil society, not just moving against extremists in the society, but in fact, closing down major mosques, closing down organizations, some of them that monitor Islamophobia within the country. And we see it also, obviously, today when we look at the genocide of the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Uyghurs in China, and the anti-Muslim policies and anti-Christian policies in India. I must also, to also be very frank, there are a number of Muslim countries in which there are issues with regard to the status of non-Muslims and very specifically Christians. Pakistan, a country that I've known for years and been close to, has had problems throughout its history and certainly in recent years. Ismail al-Faruqi, an indefatigable scholar activist, did not shy away from challenges, setbacks, and seemingly intractable problems and situations, whether it be Palestine, the US, or globally. He was indeed, in the best and truest sense of the word, his temperament was that of a mujahid. And I remember when he first taught me, I was very impressed when he emphasized in class, and I could see it when we would talk. He would say, in Islam, intentions are not enough. Good intentions have to be acted upon. That's what God expects of one. And I can remember having conversations with him about Palestine, but also a lot of other issues. Back in those days, the fact that Islam was relatively invisible in American academia, etc. But Ismail's approach was to just make it happen. So he could go to a group like the American Academy of Religion and be very vocal about not just wanting to have a panel that year, but wanting to see a permanent presence. And that meant that we had to have several years where we had meetings and were able to demonstrate that the study of Islam in terms of numbers of people that might, academics that might come and others that might come to sessions was viable. It was under his guidance that Islam took that role. And I was very happy a few years ago to become the president of the American Academy of Religion. He would not accept defeat, but advocate and espouse the renewal of this vision for AIC. If he were here today, if he was speaking to you, you would hear him repeat that vision and apply it today. And you would hear him basically emphasize the fact that that is what needs to be done. It needs to be done if one is a good Muslim. It needs to be done if one is a good citizen and cares about the country and society in which one lives in. And this is the kind of renewal and expansion that I have heard and that I believe will be seen and is being advocated by President Giannotti and the faculty. I'll end by saying that I hope that one will move forward and will be supportive of this project. And although it is not part of the preparation that I have, let me give you an example that I used to use to motivate people in my early years. When I got my degree in Islam, there was no interest in Islam. It was only with the Iranian Revolution, but also when I then had to teach, and particularly when I had to to do fundraising because I used to be invited, and I still am, by Muslim organizations to be a fundraiser. And I would go with a variety, either by myself or a variety of Muslim scholars to do the fundraising. But one of the things I developed years ago and became unpopular with some people in an audience was to say to an audience, don't be a Muslim couch potato. Couch potato in the old days was for people who would dress up, for example, on Sunday in football, or exercise outfits and watch a football game. So they just watched, they didn't do. And I would say, well, the advantage of being a Muslim couch potato at fundraisers is that you're sitting all the time and you can't reach and get that wallet out of your back pocket. This is something that requires, it seems to me, a real sense of the world in which we live and a commitment to it. And it may be that some people will say, why, can we be sure of what the future is? The fact is, this is something that when we take a look at the vision that Ismail had, the unfolding of history, and where we are today, this is something that it seems to me, Muslims and all believers and non-believers, good citizens, etc., should be committed to. The kind of education that Ismail envisioned for AIC and the kind of education that President Timothy Giannotti and his core faculty represent and intend to implement. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. It's Timothy Giannotti back with you, the president of AIC. It's in my office this time. I just want to say how much it means for us to have Professor Esposito's friendship and his support, and to really have him, as we said, as a living link between this moment of renewal at the American Islamic College and our beginnings, which reside in that visionary dream of Professor Ismail al-Faruqi, Professor Esposito's graduate advisor and mentor. A book recently came out co-published by the Center for the Study of Contemporary Islam at Shenandoah University, featuring the essential writings of Professor al-Faruqi. And this is something that I think in some ways encapsulates so many of his incredible insights and accomplishments as a scholar. And of course, Professor Esposito in his own right has accomplished so much. And so we can only aspire to follow in the footsteps of these giants. But Professor Esposito, thank you so much. It means so much to have you with us and to receive your support and your endorsement and your ongoing friendship. We have this vision, and you've heard about the vision and you've seen the vision, and we've talked about this. So we know where we must go, and we know what this institution must become if it's going to fulfill its purpose, its telos, its ultimate concern or its ultimate purpose in the world. But we also know that there's no way that we can do this on our own. There's a 13th century Sufi fable that I've often studied with my students that discusses a spiritual journey, a journey of souls, and it comes in the metaphorical form of a journey of birds. And the leader of the bird says, "I know the way. I know where to go, but I can't go there alone." And the teaching, or the profound teaching or significance of this is that we need community. We need each other. We are not meant to walk this journey alone. Rather, we are meant to walk this journey in the company of our brothers and sisters who will support us, who will call us back to the center when we need to be called back, and who will be the wind under our wings when we need them to be. And so I know where to go, and we know what we must do, and we know the critical situations in the world to which we must respond.
Ustaz Timothy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you don't think I'm being rude if I stop you there for a second.
Well, brother, I need to stop you first, because I know most of the world knows exactly who you are, but I think that many of or some of AIC's friends may not. So let me just introduce you first, and then I don't know what kind of rude interruption you have in mind, but I'm going to let you speak. But I want to introduce you first. So Abdul-Rehman Malik is a friend, and I would consider him a teacher and a friend of many decades. I first met him at the University of Toronto when he was an undergraduate student. And even at that time, when I was teaching the course and he was taking the course, I often said that God knows best who the teacher is and who the student is. Abdul-Rehman has done many things. He's an award-winning journalist and has done many wonderful things with the BBC in the UK, and has worked in Mali and in Africa and all over the world. But Abdul-Rehman right now is a lecturer and associate research scholar at Yale University at the Divinity School. And he's also the director of something called the Muslim Leadership Lab there. And he's a dexterous cultural producer. He's deeply conversant in the world of the creative arts and the performative arts, but he's also just a powerful intellect. And all of us who know you, Abdul-Rehman, we're all inspired by your energy, by your knowledge, by your humility, and by, I think most importantly, by your love. You have a way of bringing love to everything that you do. And I think later in the program, when we see your Listening While Muslim segment, we're going to see that love shining bright and clear. But I just want to say that to all of those people in the world, and there aren't very many who don't know Abdul-Rehman, but for those of you who don't know him, we have now, my superior has come on the Zoom call and on the presentation. So I'm going to defer now to you, brother.
that I cannot agree with. Thank you so much, Ustaz Timothy, for your generosity. But I wanted to kind of intervene for a moment, because when you quoted from that incredible work, The Conference of the Birds, I remember the day that you taught that, because I was in the class. And I was sitting around that table on the 14th floor of Robarts Library in 1995 with an incredible group of students. And I want to tell you that lesson, that day where you quoted that piece of text, I would say in many ways changed me and has been a reference point for my own academic journey. Ustaz Timothy, it's been so wonderful to hear about the legacy of Sheikh Ismail Faruqi. I look back at my own education and when my father and mother passed to me, and Dr. Faruqi's work, particularly that oft overlooked encyclopedia of Islam that him and his wife did, is still for me a majestic testament to the breadth and inclusivity of his vision. The way he gave words to things that we felt in our hearts and our souls when we engage with the Islamic tradition. But Timothy, I think we would be remiss I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that over the 28 years that I've known you, and over the 26 years that have passed since the day that you taught us those lines of the Conference of the Birds, I would be remiss if I didn't say that 26 years ago, you advocated, encapsulated, celebrated, and promoted the vision that you're promoting today. I don't think in some ways so much has changed, but for you, Ustaz, I think these core values haven't changed, because you showed us in that class and in the classes that followed inclusivity. You showed us what it meant to engage with tradition creatively. You showed us what it meant to be rigorous in our approach to the text and to the tradition. And you also showed us the importance of the imagination. But one last thing that you showed us today, and one thing that in what you and your colleagues have said today matters so much to me right now, is that you taught us about relevance. And I think the challenge today, isn't it, is about relevance. I teach at an institution like Yale Divinity School, which carries with it all kinds of tradition and history. But you know what I see students asking for? Relevance. They want to know where Islam fits in now. Who are the scholars, the women and the men and the people of the now? How is Islam speaking to the contemporary? And not just theologically, but how does our Islam, and as you said so beautifully, our Muslimness animate us in the world? Where does it intersect with our racial identities, our gender identities? Where does it intersect with the people who surround us in community? And I think what's most exciting for me, and that's why I had to interrupt Sidi, is that what's most exciting for me is that this vision is about imagining and building and creating that institution that has at its heart theology. But I loved what you said earlier: confident yet expansive, knowing where it's coming from, but dedicated to openness. Understanding that we emerge from a wisdom tradition, and yet we're inclusive, and that tradition doesn't just belong to us. I have a funny statement, Ustaz Timothy, and I know you'll appreciate it. My beloved mentor, older brother, friend, father figure, Fuad Mahdi, passed away just over a year ago.
May God be merciful to him.
A celebrated journalist, an incredible intellect, a masterful writer, a mischievous soul. Fuad used to say all the time, when he first used to say it to me, I sometimes would say, what is he talking about? But I appreciate now more than ever. He said, we need to liberate Islam from the Muslims. And I used to think, what does that mean? And now I know what it means. This isn't this isn't something that we keep in a box. Our tradition, our culture, our creativity, in reality, flows and imbues and is threaded with human life itself. Mm. We need institutions which liberate Islam from, as you said, the parochial, the denominational, into a space, into that exciting, discursive space of sharing and dialogue and argument and messiness, but is undergirded by the kind of rigor, creativity, and commitment to scholarship that you showed me so many years ago. So I just want to say this to those who are watching tonight, those who will be listening to this program. We cannot go forward, and I say this as many of you are watching. We are veterans of being at the front lines of community building in our own ways, and I've considered myself junior in that. When I look at our communities up and down the country, when I look particularly at the experience of African American Muslims and the resilience and the survival over 400 years of systematic oppression, I think to myself that I've been bequeathed a legacy that I didn't earn. I have an example of communities of resilience and power and strength. So this is what I'd like to say to my sisters and my brothers and my friends who are watching. We invest in institutions, and we get the institutions we invest in. This is an exciting time. There are so many important institutions emerging in the landscape that we call now the American landscape. That is exciting. There is a need for an institution like the American Islamic College, inclusive and visionary and creative and imagining, where we can teach fiqh alongside the history of Islam and jazz. That's the vision for the college. We want to understand the importance and the discipline and the intersection between Islam and hip hop culture at the same time as we're studying Ziryab and the great maqams of the past. That can only happen is if we invest. And I make a pledge tonight on behalf of myself and my family that our investment, Sidi, is in you, is in your vision and the vision of your team. We invest in institutions, yes, but I actually believe that we need to invest in people. We need to invest in those warriors of mercy, as one of my sheikhs said and told me, the warriors of mercy who are on the front line of nourishing hearts and souls and visioning what a community is going to look like. We need all the great institutions that are emerging in this country, and we need American Islamic College. I'm tired of the zero-sum language of Muslim communities. There are resources and support necessary and needed to go around. And may many thousand flowers bloom, but let AIC be, as Saadi would say, or Hafiz would say, that this be the bush that everyone comes to see in the Gulistan. May this be that fragrant place, to use the poetic language that you have used. And if you look on your screens, you'll see AICUSA.edu donate. The month of Ramadan is coming. It's the month of renewal. In a few moments we'll be listening while Muslim, and we'll be listening to sounds and musics of renewal that I and my incredible collaborator, Asad Ali Jafri, the executive director of the South Asia Institute, and one of the most talented, creative minds and curators that I know alive anywhere today. And I'm so honored to work with him. But we've been thinking a lot about renewal over these last few weeks as we've been excited about tonight. And renewal is about introspection. Renewal is about investment. Renewal is about hard work. But as Khalis Bayan and the brothers of Kool and the gang would tell us, in meditating on the Quran, renewal is also about celebration. So I want to celebrate you, Sidi, and thank you for your friendship. I want to thank the incredible team you have, people like Shaban Amir, who have had the honor of knowing for so many years, whose scholarship is second to none, people like Faryal Salim and so many others, that this diverse crew, this diverse little army of mercy and scholarship, there's great things, inshallah, that are going to come out of this. And we need to be behind you and the community. We call to the community to invest in you and the people around you and all those young and exciting personalities that I know you are already speaking to bring into this space and to build the vision that you want to build.
Thank you so much. Sidi, please tell us about what's coming next.
Well, a few years ago, Asad Jafri, incredible, as I said, curator and theorizer and doer of Muslim culture, sometime DJ, all the time expert on Muslim culture, and I began to imagine, while I was out at the Doris Duke Institute of Islamic Arts Museum, the Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Arts, Culture, and Design, a kind of a program, an event, an experience where we would encourage our audiences to literally listen like Muslims. We started thinking, what does it mean to listen like a Muslim? When you put on these kind of aural, A-U-R-A-L, lenses, what do we hear? Now, anyone can listen like a Muslim. You don't have to be Muslim, but you have to start to engage with Muslim sensitivity. And what you realize is when you begin to listen like a Muslim, you begin to hear the sounds and the musics that are around you, that are significant and influential in the societies that you live in, and globally, you start to hear those sounds differently. And so we started this program of listening parties and sort of DJ sets. Imagine that we're sitting in your living room circa 1976. We have crates of LPs and vinyls in front of us, and you and I are sharing finds from our boxes. That's what we try to do with you. And tonight, Asad and I have the honor and privilege of presenting Listening While Muslim, a special edition in honor of the spirit of renewal and in honor of the invitation extended to us by Ustad Timothy Giannotti and the American Islamic College. I hope all of you enjoy this small offering and are lifted by it as we approach the blessed month of Ramadan.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you for having me, Ustad Timothy.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the world we living in. You ain't been here before? Well, come on in. You can thank us by making sure you come again. Now you're welcome. And next time, bring a friend.
Greetings, the Rastaman nothing. Salam, salam, salam. Greetings to each and every one. Salam, salam, salam. Anytime you meet or greet anyone, whether it namaste, assalamu alaikum. Know that salam means peace unto you. Salam, salam, salam. Apa kabar kawan? Ku ucap rahayu.
Welcome and assalamu alaikum, everyone. We are now listening while Muslim. Thank you so much to the American Islamic College for hosting us for this session. We are now in a trans-global sonic soul celebration. We are in a listening party where we apply our Muslim lens to the worlds of music. And today I have my wonderful co-producer, co-host, my Sheikh, Abdul-Rehman Malik.
Thank you, Asad Bhai. The theme tonight is renewal. The theme tonight is rebirth. And in the next few moments, we are going to take you through a number of tracks that is going to take us all around the world and back, that celebrate and that focus our hearts and our minds on the theme of renewal. And you know, Asad, at the top of this set, we heard the amazing Ras Muhammad from Indonesia calling us to peace and salam and sending goodwill. But with the coming of Ramadan, I think to myself, we're about to be given the gift of being able to renew ourselves spiritually and prepare ourselves for the challenges of the times that we live in. And I think whenever we're given that opportunity, there's only one thing that we can say.
A lot of people wonder, a lot of speculation going on about who's in control, who is God, who's on top of this thing. Am I God? Is God in me? I got the answer. About to give it to you all. It goes like this. God make the world get up and move. God make the world go round. God make the moon rise high. God make the sun shine Allah. Ha ha ha. We are the grand groove. God make the world get up and move. God Allah make the world get up and move. God make the world. God make the world. You check it, all praise due the merciful and beneficent sovereign universe.
You heard their ad-lib featuring the mighty Mos Def with a track called All Praise Due. And right after that, we had another track called All Praises to Allah. What were we listening to second, Abdul-Rehman?
We were listening to Bubba Thomas and the Lightmen, and I want to ask everyone to join us in saying a prayer for Brother Bubba Thomas, who passed away just over a year ago. And Bubba Thomas and the Lightmen represented this emerging form of free jazz, which unleashed was a form of music that encompasses celebration and the spirit being released. And of course, this is just a small part. We're just touching one facet of this multifaceted relationship between Islam and jazz music.
Of course, and it's an ecstatic relationship at times, right? As we could hear with that track. And somebody that I think about often is the great Idris Muhammad, the funky drummer, if you will. He's a drummer for so many jazz musicians, a musician in his own right in terms of being a solo musician and a collaborative musician, ventures into the worlds of soul and funk as well, and has some of the coolest album covers, because if you look at him, you might think for a second, is this brother a jazz drummer, a funk drummer, or is this brother from the Tablighi Jamaat, and is he going to be coming to my door next? And he might be doing both, right? Let's hear this track, which is a meditation, and it's called Could Heaven Ever Be Like This?
I feel music in your eyes. Rainbows in your kiss. I have never reached such highs. Could heaven ever be like
Idris Muhammad gives us music to imagine the paradise that we can create here on earth by coming together for goodness, but the paradise that awaits us when we are doing goodness. And that's what I love about Idris. It takes us deep, but it takes us to places of so much joy.
And we're talking about masters here, masters, and one for sure that Muslims in the contemporary sense, in the traditional sense, hundreds of years ago, from inspiring the birth of the guitar to music right now, are the masters, right? They are people who are inspiring. They're creating amazing music. And one of those great masters is the late, great Khaira Arbi from Timbuktu, Mali. And when things weren't going so well there a few years ago, right? It was people like Khaira Arbi that came back and claimed the traditions that came from this space that were really rooted in this praise music. So why don't we listen to a song from her?
When we listen to Khaira Arbi, we're listening to the roots of the blues. We're listening to musics that were carried over by souls who were enslaved in chains and came to these lands that we now call the Americas and recreated that music in the field hollers, in the devotional traditions that sustained and gave them resilience against the evils of slavery and white supremacism and oppression. I can't not listen to Khaira Arbi and hear that genealogy, that DNA that carries itself here. And of course, Asad, the DNA of the music of West Africa carries across the continent. Let's listen to Pops Muhammad, an incredible musician from South Africa, who's taken some of that West African music and made it his own in cosmopolitan Johannesburg.
And thinking about Renewal, the track itself is called Spirit. We've talked about Mali, we've talked about South Africa. I want us to keep going east because if we're listening while Muslim, we have to talk about the subcontinent. And I'm going to take us to Pakistan. I'm going to take us to a tradition that's very old. I'm going to take us to a tradition that is 7 centuries old and people can trace their lineage to reciting these. And I'm going to take you to a kalam, a poetry from Baba Bulle Shah sung by Hadika Kiani.
कर ले दिल दी सफाई जे दीदार चाहिदा कर ले दिल दी सफाई जे दीदार चाहिदा ओ कर ले दिल दी सफाई जे दीदार चाहिदा कर ले दिल दी सफाई जे दीदार चाहिदा ओ कर ले दिल दी सफाई
Bulla Shah, the great poet of the Punjab, is instructing us, clean your heart, prepare your heart for the spiritual gifts that God wants to give you, but you have to clear out space. You got to renew yourself before you can receive those spiritual gifts. And one of the amazing things that I find about the poets of the subcontinent is that they themselves in their time were facing down dour religious authorities who had become so obsessed with the law and the brittleness of the text that in many ways they had lost the spirit of celebration and celebrating God and celebrating God's gifts that is so much at the heart of our Islamic tradition. And I think this next track is a track which embodies that in so many ways.
It's a celebration. Let's celebrate. We're gonna have a good time tonight. Let's celebrate. It's all right. We're gonna have a good time tonight. Let's celebrate. It's
And you know, AR, when I listen to that track, I also think about joy. I think about praise music, right? And I think about gratitude as well, and all of those being part of Renewal. And this track that just came out from Rhiannon Giddens, an amazing musician who uses this core of Black Southern folk music and connects it to all corners of the world really naturally, and is doing something extremely universal that I don't think other people can do. She's directing the Silk Road project. She's doing an opera on Omar bin Said. And this track that everybody should know, even though she doesn't say the words in this, to me is that powerful, universal, spiritual song. You've been listening while Muslim. My name is Asad Ali Jafri.
I'm Abdul-Rehman Malik.
Why don't we take it out with Amazing Grace from Rhiannon Giddens?
Let's give it up to Asad and Abdul-Rehman. What a beautiful tribute. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you to every one of you for joining us today. Thank you to our faculty, to Professor Giannotti, to the Board of American Islamic College. I thank every one of you who are here to celebrate the renewal and revival of American Islamic College. Your support will go a long way. As we prepare to welcome Ramadan, please remember American Islamic College as in your prayers and with your support. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We are determined to go far, and we need you to be with us. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors once again. Thank you, Islamic Relief. Thank you to the Center of Islam in the Contemporary World at Shenandoah University, to the Khalil Center, to Heart, Women and Girls, and to Ifanka. None of this could happen without you. You are all significant in this renewal, and we thank you again for your generous support to this mission. If you are inspired by what you heard today, please share our mission and our vision with your family and friends. Find us on social media and reach out to us wherever you will find us. I think it's befitting that I end tonight with a quote from the Conference of the Birds. I know our King, but how can I alone endure the journey to his distant throne? Join me, and when at last we end our quest, our King will greet us as an honored guest.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. نحن أولياؤكم في الحياة الدنيا وفي الآخرة ولكم فيها ما تشتهي أنفسكم ولكم فيها ما تدعون. نزلا من غفور رحيم. ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين. ولا تستوي الحسنة ولا السيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه عداوة كأنه ولي حميم وما يلقاها إلا الذين صبروا وما يلقاها إلا ذو حظ عظيم وإما ينزغنك من الشيطان نزغ فاستعذ بالله إنه هو السميع العليم صدق الله العظيم